Hello, this is Dr. Escurra again. The class today will be the final class on flower morphology. Next week, we are going to see inflorescences, which are groups of flowers or aggregations of flowers and their properties. And we are going also to see the morphology of fruits. The class today corresponds to the last lecture of week 2, which is lecture 3 from week 2. The course is BPSC 031 Spring Wildflowers and corresponds to the lecture on Friday, April 10th of the course. We are going to talk today a little bit about the shape of the corolla, the shape of the agglomeration of petals, and second part of the class, we're going to talk about the morphology of the androecium, which is the set of male parts in the flower, and the gynoecium, the set of female parts in the flower. So let me share a screen, and we'll start with plant morphology. Sorry, that was the wrong screen share. This one now. Sorry about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the names of actinomorphic corollas. Remember last class, we talked about two widely different types of corollas, which are actinomorphic corollas, or star-shaped corollas that radiate equally in all directions, that have many planes of symmetry, like a sea star or like an anemone, if we want to take a comparison with the animal kingdom, against zygomorphic corolla or zygomorphic corollas, are pronounced both ways, with a Z and a Y. Zygomorphic corollas are corollas that have only one plane of symmetry. One half of the corolla is a mirror image of the other half of the corolla. Now, in the case of actinomorphic corollas, there is a whole complicated set of names for different types of corolla, especially if the petals are fused. But the most common ones are rotate, for corollas that are wide open; campanulate, for corollas that look like a bell; funnel form, and that is self-explanatory, like in the Morning Glory, for corollas that have the shape of a funnel; salver form corollas are basically long tubes, like tubular corollas, we're going to see them in a second, but that open in the top in a fairly flat structure of petals, creating a flat disc-like platform. Salver in Latin means tray. So they're tray-like corollas, where the tube of a corolla seems to be like the handle of a tray. And tubular corollas are basically tubes. Tubular corollas is always a giveaway. They're pollinated by either moths, in particular hawk moths that have very long proboscis, or hummingbirds. The same with most salverform corollas too. Zygomorphic corollas have a number of configurations that can be very, very complicated, like orchids, for example, that have a really complicated configuration, or in the family Bignoniaceae, also like the jacaranda tree, that has also a zygomorphic configuration. We're going to see, because of the families in the California wildflowers that have zygomorphic corollas, correspond basically to two families, which is the mint family and the legume family, the pea family. All plants in the mint family have a type of structure that is known as the bilabiate or bilabiate corolla. It has two lips, labia in Latin meaning lips. It has a lower lip here and an upper lip on top. The upper lip is formed by the fusion of three petals. So bilabiate flowers are really flowers of 5 petals, 3 fused on top, 2 fused below, hence the 2 lips. The sexual parts run under little tunnel formed by the upper part of the lips, run under the upper lip. And it's really interesting when an insect comes into the flower and stands in the lower lip, which acts as the landing strip, it tends to produce a deformation of the flower in which the upper part comes down and hits the insect in order to get the pollen that it might have brought from different flowers. You can see that in bilabiate flowers, also in papilionation flowers, the stigma, the female part, is more exerted than the male part. So the insect coming in, the first thing that they will touch is a female part in order to leave pollen from other flowers they have been before. And then as it comes out, or very often once it's in and the lips bend, it will get the pollen from the anthers that are hidden inside the upper lip. Papilionaceous corolla is very common they are the distinctive corolla in tribe of the bean family, the common beans, have also 5 petals. They have an large upper petal known as the banner petal. They have 2 fused petals in the center that form a structure known as a keel. So these are the keel petals, and it has 2 outer petals that basically act as the director of landing to the insect. They're showing to the insect the direction of landing. Insects will land here on the keel, and as they walk on the keel, the 2 petals will open. The first thing the insect will hit is the stigma, and then the other things that the insect will hit is the anthers that are hidden inside. So, in summary, we're going to see basically in the plants we might see during this course 2 different types of zygomorphic corollas, bilabiate and papilionaceous. There are many more, especially remember the orchids. The orchids can be extremely complicated, but we won't see them because there are no native orchids in California. Okay, you have some images. A rotate corolla, as in the common tomato. This is a tomato plant. Funnel form corolla, as in also in the tomato family, the genus Brugmansia, the trumpet flowers. They have, of course, as the name suggests, the shape of the corolla is like a funnel, like a trumpet. Salviform corollas have tubes that open in a flat surface on top. Campanulate corollas look like a bell. Campana in Latin means bell. Bilabiate corollas, you can see it here in the lower image, have an upper lip, a lower lip, and the sexual parts run immediately below the upper lip. So when the insect lands in the lower lip, the whole thing will bend and hit the insect with the stigma first and the pollen later. And papilionaceous corollas, common in the bean family, have a large standard petal that you can, banner petal that you can see it here, a large banner petal. It has 2 wings. You can see here 1 wing and 2 wings. And in the center, it has the keel. The keel is where the sexual parts are. And as the insect sets in the center of a flower in order to aim for the nectar, for the reward for pollinators, the keel will open and smear the insect with pollen and also touch the insect with a stigma in order to get pollen from other plants. And tubular corollas here in the Indian tobacco, Nicotiana glauca, a common invasive shrub in California. Also in the potato family, in the tomato family, in the Solanaceae, is basically a large tube with a very little expansion of the upper part of the corolla. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit today about the androecium. The androecium is the male function of the flower, and it's formed by a series of elements known as stamens. Each stamen is formed in turn, we saw it last class, by a filament, and a structure here like two little rounded balls that are called anthers, oblong. They look almost like footballs very often. The anthers themselves, if you make a transversal cut and look at them in the microscope, you will see that they have, each anther normally has two pollen sacs, rarely one, but normally two pollen sacs. Eventually, as the plant ripens, the anthers will eventually open in the side, sometimes on top, a phenomenon known in science, in botany as dehiscence. They will dehisce, they will open and start releasing the pollen that is coming from the inside. Remember, the pollen is like the sperm of the flower, and it's released through the process of dehiscence. So when an insect touches the anther, it will get a rain of pollen hitting its body, sticking to the body, and then taking it to other plants, or a hummingbird also. The continuation of a filament into the anthers is known as the connective. It's a part of the anthers that, that connects the two anthers to the supporting filament. Okay, more complicated now, the gynoecium. The gynoecium has a complicated nomenclature, and it's important that we get it quite clear. It has carpels that is it's basically one carpel is a bract that has stigma, style, and an ovary below. The ovary is the lower part of the carpel or the pistil, and it has a locule, placenta, and ovules. We'll see that in detail later. I think more than flooding you with nomenclature, I think we'll go to some illustrations and make it more understandable. Here we have a typical ovary with a style and a stigma. And the ovary is has only a single locus, a single space inside, and is formed by only one transformed leaf. It's the simplest ovary possible, one transformed leaf forming a single ovary. And that is known as a monocarpous gynoecium, monocarpous, single fruit gynoecium. You might have, as in this other image, a gynoecium that is formed by many carpels. Each one of these is a transformed leaf forming a pistil. And so you have one pistil here, another pistil here, another pistil here. If I count them well, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm counting. They're like 6 pistils. This is an apocarpous gynoecium. Apo, remember, means separate. A gynoecium formed by separate fruits or by separate ovaries. Now, here we have a complicated story that is, unfortunately, is very common among plants, so we need to understand this well. We see one pistil, only one pistil with one style, but if you go to the top, you will see that it has 3 stigmas, right? It has a 3-lobed stigma. You can see it in this flower here. You can see it also in this flower here. Okay, what does that mean? It means that the ovary itself is a result of a fusion of 3 bracts, of 3 leaves that form an ovary. So it's got only one pistil. Remember, a pistil is a functional definition. It's this bottle-like structure with a style that looks like a handle. Remember, it's a pestle, like the pestle used in mortars to grind stuff. But this is formed by more than one leaf. Or more than one bract forming it. Let me show you a few illustrations so you will start understanding this phenomenon, which is the evolution of the pistil. Here you have originally, as we discussed last class, gymnosperms have ovules that are in bracts. They're in open bracts. In the magnolia, for example, and some of the most primitive plants, they look very much like a gymnosperm, but apart from having showy petals, the ovules have folded into a closed chamber that is an ovary. So basically, an ovary is a bract that has folded into a closed chamber. And the top of the bract makes, of course, the style and the stigma, the little path, the road for the pollen to get in. And you can see here, as we have them on the side of the leaf, you can see here on the fusion of the two bracts, you can see the ovules sitting there waiting for the pollination to make an embryo. So this is one carpel forming one pistil. You have one carpel, which is one transformed bract, that by folding forms one pistil. But sometimes you might get this story. A pistil, a single pistil, formed by the fusion of three carpels, for example. Here we have 1, 2, 3 carpels that are fused to form a single pistil. But the style of the pistil is one. The bottle-like structure looks like one. But if you cut it in half, you will see that it has 3 chambers. It doesn't have one chamber, it has 3 chambers. And if you look at the stigma on top, you will often see that the stigma has 3 lobes that are quite distinctive in most cases. So this is a gynoecium formed by 3 carpels, 3 fused carpels, and 1 pistil, with, in this case, with 3 styles, but most commonly with 1 fused style also. So this gives a fairly complex terminology. Plants can have a single carpel with a simple pistil. Plants, as in peas and beans, for example, plants can have multiple distinct carpels that are not fused, and that gives many simple pistils, as in the little fruits on the sides of the strawberries. But plants can have multiple connate or fused carpels that will give one single pistil. So carpels and pistils are not synonymous. Carpels, when we talk about carpels in botany, we're making reference to the bracts that gave origin to that type of flower. And when we talk about pistils, it basically is a functional structure that looks like a pestle, the bottle-like structure where the ovules are. So plants can have only one pistil, but the pistil can be formed by many carpels, as in the example here, or plants can have only one pistil, but the pistil may be formed by only one carpel, as in the example here. So this gives a fairly initially daunting interpretation of the gynoecium of plants. Before we go into the detailed interpretation of it, let me show you like a living demonstration that carpels forming the ovary are indeed transformed leaves. This is an Asian plant common in southern China and also in India, Firmiana simplex, a plant in the cacao family, where the carpels are joined into a single fruit and they join on top. And once the fruit ripens and matures, you can see they open and they actually show very well the structure like a leaf. They're green, they're leafy, and the ovules, once they become fertilized, they become the fruits, are standing on the edges of that leaf. You can actually see very well here the structure of the carpels that gave origin to the fruit. Once they dry, they look like dry leaves sitting in the plant. Another common example, that this one is perhaps better because you can see it all over Riverside and all over LA, is this plant known as the varnish tree. It's a tree very commonly planted in streets. You will see them very often in the streets. Also, the scientific name is called Reuteria paniculata, Reuteria paniculata, in the soapberry family, the Sapindaceae. common in riverside. And you can see the fruit. Once the fruit forms, you can see actually the leaf-like structure of the carpels and the seeds that used to be before ovules sitting attached to the basal part of the venation of the leaf. It's very easy to see here how the carpels have originated from a leaf. So this discussion will lead me to the different, what we know as placentation types, where the placenta of the ovules is located. In the simplest form, a pistil formed by only one carpel. Remember, the carpel is a bract, a transformed leaf. They have the ovules sitting on the edge of the leaf. And so you will have the ovules sitting on the suture of the single carpel that is enfolded around itself. And that is known as marginal placentation. Now, this is another example. Imagine that the carpel is not formed by, that the pistil is not formed by one carpel, but is formed by the fusion of three bracts, of three carpels. Here I have 1, 2, and 3 carpels. And you can see the ovules sitting in the suture, in the fusion of the carpels. Now, let us complicate the story a little bit more. Imagine that these 3 carpels themselves become twisted inwards in such a way that the fusion is all along these walls now. So this is one carpel, this is another carpel, and this is another carpel. So the placentation now is known as axial placentation. Now imagine that throughout evolution, these walls have disappeared. You will only be able to know that these plants are formed by 3 carpels because you will see with using microscopy the suture, the evolutionary memory, like the appendix in human beings, the memory of the existence of 3 carpels. But the walls have disappeared, and now there's a central column where the ovules are seated, and this is known as free central placentation. And finally, here you have the case of one pistil formed by one single carpel with only one ovule inside, like the magnolias, or like many plants in the family Rosaceae, like the cherries and the prunes and the apricots and the peaches. They all have only one seed, and if you look at the pistil when they are in the flower, they have only one ovule, and placentation here is known as basal placentation. The ovule is attached to the base of the pistil. So I think I'll stop here. I hope during the in-person part of the class, I'm recording a day before now. I'm recording on the 9th. During the in-person part of the class, I will bring some fruits, which are a good way of seeing placentation. It's very important to understand the structure of fruits and the structure of the placenta. The placenta is an extremely interesting organ that appeared in plants around 160 million years ago in the middle, the first part of the Cretaceous. And it appeared in mammals somewhat later, towards the end of the Cretaceous, and totally independently. Their occurrence is unrelated. They are a case of convergent evolution. But it's very interesting food for thought, as a matter of fact, that as life on Earth has become more and more complex, organisms have started to retain the embryo in the tissue, in the body of the mother organism, in this case, the mother plant, that will feed the embryo until it becomes a seed and will endow it with nutrients, with reserves in the form of endosperm. So the placenta, in many ways, it's a fascinating structure in which 2 generations overlap. when you see a bean, genetically, in terms of DNA, the external part of the bean pod, if you're eating green beans, the external part of the bean pod has the genome structure, has the genetic composition of the mother plant. But each of the seeds inside has the genetic composition of the offspring, which is half of the genes come from the mother plant, the other half come from the male pollen that fertilizes, which is the same, as a matter of fact, when any mammal has offspring in the uterus. The offspring doesn't have the same genetic constitution as a mother plant. So two generations, genetically different, overlap when organisms have a placenta. And this is a really interesting thing, that it happened in evolution only in the last 100 million years, which might seem a very long time, but really, when you think that life on Earth has more than 3 billion years, it's fairly recent in evolutionary terms, in the long history of life on Earth. And plants and animals reached the same genetic solution, which is retention of the embryo in the organism until the embryo is able to survive. In animals, before placental mammals existed, reproduction was mostly by laying eggs. In plants, before seed plants existed, reproduction was mostly by spores. It was done outside the tissue of the maternal plant. So this is just a final reflection. If you think about fruits, perhaps the main reason why plants have fruits is because fruits, especially edible fruits, are in some way some bribery that the plant gives to dispersal organisms, telling them, you know, you can take this, you can eat it, and in doing so, you should take my offspring, my seed, and disperse it into favorable places. Anyway, we'll discuss about that more in class. I thank you very much for your attention in this class, and we'll start Monday next week, Monday the 13th. We are going to start discussing inflorescences, and then later in that week, in the third week, fruits. Thank you very much.